So let's take apart this CJRB Pyrite and see what we're working with. Okay, we're dealing with what looks like to be a T8 and T6s, and the one screw on the pocket clip here on the bottom side of the pocket clip goes straight through the back spacer. So it looks like we can just take these two T6s out, probably pull that side of the pivot, and the whole thing will come apart. So T8, that's it. T6. Doesn't feel like they used any Loctite, or look like they used any Loctite on the screw either, which is fine because I plan on taking it apart. I knew I was going to take it apart when I bought it. So there we go. We get those and see about opening it up. Lift that top scale off. There we go. The washer, ball bearing washer came off, and there's our scale. There's how skeletonized they are, how hollow they are. So one of the things mentioned before that I want to do is make new scales out of some form of material. I've been thinking maybe doing it out of copper, brass, or bronze, or sticking with paper or linen fabric type of micarta with a metal insert in that micarta for rigidity. But we'll see. But this thing, I've been really liking it. It's a good knife, good fit. It's slick, of course, with this just metal. So if I were to keep these alone, I would have to put some sort of texture on this, on these scales, so that it's not as slippery in my beat up hands. But it does sound very hollow, very clanky when it opens, and that's obviously because of the milling out, but it is nice and light compared to, say, the standard steel pilar, which is quite heavy with the solid steel. So anyway, let's take it apart, clean it, and see if we can't make that action a little better. So there's one of the bearings, and it feels like, there we go, the button is coming off, and there is the button. It's hollow on the underside to accept the spring and encapsulate the spring, and it looks to be tapered on that side. Well, give me a minute, we'll get it apart. There's the spring. Put that on our sticker and pull the blade off. And there's the pivot is D-shaped, but looking at it, there's obviously no D-shape in the blade. And the weird thing is there's no D-shape in the scale either. So the pivot itself is D-shaped, but really with no purpose that I'm aware of. So all right, let's clean this up a bit with a little standard rubbing alcohol. And make sure we don't have any gunk or anything in the recess. So that was interesting to me to find out, to see that, and I've watched other people take apart these knives, but generally taking apart the pyrite with the micarta scales. I wanted to see what the steel scales look like, which is why I bought this version. But I was interested to find out that the bearing, the washer, actually goes recessed into the blade. I don't know why. It doesn't really, I guess, make too much of a difference. Thins that stock a little bit. But when I put ball bearing washers in the custom pilar that I made, I recessed the scales. Didn't even consider the blade. It was just interesting that they do it out of the blade. Didn't know that. I don't know if all brands do that or not, but we'll clean it up and we'll take a look at this mechanism a little bit. So I am going to hit these with a little abrasive pad, hit the inside of the scale with an abrasive pad, just to make sure they're nice and smooth and not running on anything that's catching the bearings, so that it's a little more drop shot. Clean off the bearings. Now I'll do a final cleaning, but I want to take a look at this mechanism, because that was the other reason for buying this. I originally wanted to make that pilar a button lock, but I'd never seen one or been able to take one apart. This is why I love pretty much taking apart everything. Everything that comes across our house gets taken apart. I've been doing it since I was a kid. But so this is in, let's just pretend this is open, and this is the orientation of the button. So in the open position, it looks like the button is yeah, so it's not pushed all the way out, and it's being held in by this hard kind of 90 recess in the tang of the blade, or the back of the blade, whatever it's called, and that's holding it locked. Coming over to the, I guess, detent portion of it, it's actually chamfered right here with a flat bottom, so that this angle that we looked at a minute ago on the button right here, this shape lets it slide off that chamfer on the blade to create that detent. So it's got enough pressure to hold it in a lock position. But when you go to flick it, thumb flick it, whatever you're doing to open it, when you go to open the blade, that chamfer and angle let it slide out of that detent. That's pretty cool. I mean, it amazes me that you have such a cool design that's so simple. I mean, obviously, it would, you know, to think of it and to come up with a design is pretty impressive, but in function, in actuality, when you see it, there's nothing to it. It's super simple. It's like an OTF. I need to take apart my OTF and show that, because the mechanism inside that OTF is ingenious, but it's just super simple. There's nothing to it. And when you break one apart and see what's actually inside that OTF, it's nuts. It's ingenious, but it's just so simple. Simple mechanism. So anyway, let's clean this off with a little, just an abrasive scrubbing pad. Nothing fancy, nothing that's removing too much material. Just buffing it up a little bit, polishing it, make sure there's nothing sticking up from the manufacturing. And my compressor is broken, so I don't have any compressed air to blow that off. I'll just have to clean it especially well. And we'll do the same thing to the other side here. Just polish that side up, make sure there's nothing that will be catching on those washers. See, there we go. Just cleaned up. Use the dirty rag for a minute, and we'll switch to a clean one. Give everything a final clean and put it back together. I would imagine these would catch a lot of dirt. If you're concerned about that, I'm not really, but in your pocket and in use, these recesses, I would imagine, would catch quite a bit. As well as the micarta version, they use the same basic skeletonized piece of metal. They just don't have a top on it, and they put the micarta scales on it instead. So I don't know which direction I want to go. I like having the metal scales, the weight of it, but my Benchmade turret that I put Gene micarta scales on has a nice grip and a nice feel. And if I were to do that with these, I might even make it more contoured rather than quite as just flat. But we'll see. The blade itself, I think, is going to be polished. I don't know how this AR-RPM 9 artisan cutlery metal, and I guess you can see it there, AR-RPM 9 CJRB. Fit, maybe focus and getting light. I can't see the camera to tell, but anyway, I don't know if it'll take it, how well it might or might not take a polish, but what we'll do is we'll cover up the pivot section that would be inside the scales with either some tape or some fingernail polish, so that we don't remove any metal here that would be needed to keep the thickness for the back spacers and everything. And then the back spacers themselves, I might actually just build a solid back spacer instead of using these two kind of standoff style. And the pocket clip, if we're making our own scale, we can use basically any type of pocket clip you want, because we can just thread in our holes wherever needed, drill them and put the threads in. So I like this center style rather than say the Benchmade with the triple screw orientation, but maybe something that I make or something milled, we'll see. We'll play around, and I'm not really going to worry too much about a lanyard hole. Won't be needing that on it, so we will just disregard that and see what we come out with. All right, so one final clean of all the bits and pieces. And get the pivot here, so we go. And the spring, just in case nothing in it. And we'll actually take the spring, and I'm just going to grab it by both ends and just untension it a little bit. Make it a little, just a touch tighter. I didn't really pull and hold that resistance on it, just a little bit. So let's get to putting it back together, which I don't have any of those fancy oils, just some hops. 9, and we'll put a little bit inside where the recess for the bearings go, and then the same thing on where they go for the scales, where the bearings are for the scales. So clean my finger a little bit, put that away. Alright, so starting with the side that still has the lock pin in it, which is in there pretty firm, kind of nice that I don't have to worry about holding that in as well. Put the D-cut pivot for whatever reason in, and one of the bearings. And we'll put the blade. It seemed to go on pretty well, or come off pretty well with it in the open position. So we'll put the spring, if I don't lose the spring, we'll put the spring in the recess in the scale, and then fit our button into that recess. There we go. Right, let's see. There we go. Buttons in, held in place by the blade, probably fairly precarious, and attempt to put this on and keep the button in place. Now, see that right off the bat. And I know it's not tight and the pivot screw's not in, but it's already quite a bit freer. Okay, so I'm gonna start by putting in, I'm not using any Loctite because I will be taking this apart as well. And make sure to put our T8 back in. See how we're doing. And I'm just taking it till it's snug. Centering, still pretty good there, you can see. And the detent is fairly free. See if I'd loosen it just a touch. And that's really quite free. The button itself has a bit of catch in there, and it'll probably work out over time, but I think that's too loose. I think I have too much play. No, actually there's no play when it's locked up. Still going to give it just a little tight. And there we go. Taking it apart. Next thing is to get some more epoxy because I'm out, and decide what we want to go with. So anyway, there you go, taking apart a CJRB Pyrite with the solid steel scales. And just to add, I am going to strop it a little bit and just kind of refine that edge with my little homemade scrap of leather I had laying around that I put some green abrasive in. But let's see, I can't really see it on the edge of the table here. Maybe that'll get it. I didn't really show you beforehand, but I think everybody's seen them. They've come pretty sharp from CJRB. Seemed to not have a problem with that, but now just honed up a little bit. and cutting all the way through the length of the blade. Nice. So we'll be back with more projects.